This is Geek Gab with your host, Dornall and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back. Geek Gab for Saturday, April 2nd, 2022. Today on the show with us we have Mill SF Master Richard Fox, who for reasons that are top secret, classified, and otherwise compartmentalized, can't be with us for our normal hour of awesomeness. So we are jumping right into the discussion. Mr. Fox, welcome to Geek Gab.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
And of course, welcome to my awesome co-host on whose back the terrible burden of the show rests. And I just want to say what a honor it is to have you on the show, Dornall, and of course, what an honor it is to have our guest on the show. How are Man, I don't want to ask that question. That's going to be an awful question to answer. What is the latest and greatest book you have published?
Let's see. I had just put out the fifth book of my Exile Fleet series called The Last Ditch, and that is a military sci-fi space opera series involving a otherwise peaceful star nation that was conquered out of nowhere by an enemy that no one had any contact with. And then during the course of the series, the one surviving fleet has to, figure out who actually attacked them and then rally the rest of the free peoples of the galaxy to help liberate their homeworld. And I'm working on the sixth and final book of that right now, titled Liberty or Death.
And do you have like a guess as to ETA?
Liberty or Death should be out probably the second or third week of April. So I've already got a good portion of it edited already. I got the cover all lined up. I just have to, finish writing it. So I'm actually almost done with it. So that's good news.
All right.
Did you say that was the final one in the series?
Right. Yeah, it would be the sixth and final book for the Albion Lost series. Excuse me, for the Exile Fleet series.
Now, every time I talk to people about indie publishing or Mill SF, I went into a big Mill SF indie publishing kick 2 or 3 months ago. I was reading a bunch of different series by a bunch of different people, or sometimes just the first book. If I didn't really click with the author, and every time I ask people, okay, who's someone, give me some advice on people I can read who are good people writing good Mill SF. Your name always came up. Why is that?
I would have to ask the folks we recommended, but no, I've been writing Mill SF and space opera full time for about 7 years now, and my main series that I'm probably best known for is the Ember War, and I just finished off the final book in that whole series earlier this year, which was a little sad, but the story ended right where the story should have ended. So I mean, I'm happy about that. Not every series gets to that point, but I served in the military. I did 2 tours in Iraq and graduated from the United States Military Academy, also known as West Point. So there's a lot to my background that was all about military, also military history, and then I've loved science fiction since before I could walk. So putting all these things together has worked out pretty well. I think it's a real chocolate and peanut butter sort of situation.
Okay, so there's 2 big series that you're working on. You said the most popular was the Ember War, and I've actually heard of that before. I believe I noticed it when it was turned into a comic book series, which, I mean, not everybody gets to do that.
No, yeah. John Delarosa and I worked together, and we, along with Arkham Press and Vox Day, I might have mispronounced his publishing house, but we did get the first book turned into a graphic novel. We're working on the second one. I don't think it's going to pan out, but well, you know what? That's part of of publishing is taking risks, and not every risk works out, which is why they're called risks.
Well, the nice thing about writing for 7 years straight is if you want to write another book, you don't need to wait on an artist to finish everything up for you.
It's true. Yeah, when for indie publishing, it's all on me, and then just getting the cover. And for the most part, asking one artist to draw one picture that becomes a cover is a lot easier than going to an established graphic novelist and saying, "I need 80 pages of this," because then it becomes a whole different kind of project.
Oh boy, oh boy. So, uh, unlike DW, I don't read military science fiction much. So, can you tell me a little bit about the Ember War? What is that?
Sure. The Ember War is a series that it's all about survival, and it opens with a probe from a helpful alien civilization comes to Earth and realizes that there's an evil uh, uh, fleet of drones called the Zaros that are on their way to Earth, and this other alien probe realizes that Earth has a chance to survive, but the way that humanity can survive is going to be very difficult and is going to involve a great deal of sacrifice. So this probe contacts a young inventor by the name of Mark Ibarra, and they put together a plan to, one, survive the initial invasion, and then after surviving that initial invasion and retaking Earth, then there's a whole another war of how to defeat the larger threat of the Zaros across the galaxy. So the first series was 9 books long. It's all military science fiction. I like to call it, it's Michael Bay, but with marginally better dialogue throughout. And then it's so much fun to write because I just decided to have a lot of fun when I was writing it. And so there's a part where I'm like, I'm going to have giant walking tanks with a person inside of a little cocoon within it, plugged into the robot, and they're going to just go out there and punch more aliens. And it was just a blast to write. And then then also, of course, you have the characters who come up and who become fan favorites over the time. And there's one character by the name of Standish, who's your thief with a heart of gold kind of character. And the thing about Standish is, he's a Marine who's constantly getting demoted because he gets caught stealing or whatnot. And me being a veteran, every so often I run into other veterans who said, "I knew Standish. He was in my unit." And it's amazing how there's been a Standish in different militaries across the world where people say, like, "Oh yeah, I know that guy." And it's I always thought that was funny, where there's that one guy who keeps stealing stuff and uses it for everyone else. And it's been amusing to watch what's happening in Ukraine, to see all the farmers with the tractors making off with Russian tanks. I'm thinking, okay, it's good to know that that sort of what's the word I'm looking for here? Opportunism exists everywhere. So it's fun
as a global archetype, but
yeah,
real human character.
Yeah, and then with the Ember War, the first 9 books, that story ended right well, but there was a little bit more unresolved, and that became a whole another series. And then at the end of that series, there was another problem, and that became the third and final series. And it's almost, because I would say the whole Ember War is in the 30s when it comes up to books, and altogether, I think it's a good read for everybody. The problem is with if you go to someone and say, "Hey, how would you like to start this 30-book series?" Some people are like, "That's quite the commitment." Because I'm one of the kind of people who, like, once I start a series, I feel obligated to read all of it. No matter if I don't like it, I started it. Gosh darn it, I'm going to finish. So I think there's some people who might have a little trepidation about starting something so long. But
I wish more writers had that sort of obligation when they're making 30-book series.
Yeah, I didn't think that the Ember War would go on that long, but thanks to my readers who really enjoyed it. There was an audience and there was a story, so fine, I'll keep telling the Ember War stories, and people keep giving good reviews and keep purchasing it. So it's like, well, why would I stop? But I did stop because the story got to the point where it was over, and if I just kept going, it would feel like I was really milking it for no purpose. And I think readers can really pick up on that real quick, where they're like, filler, and then they get a little upset because now they're just reading filler.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got a reputation, and if you just keep on churning out, trash for a brand, people know, and that damages your brand, and that damages the Ember War brand, but it damages your reputation as an author. And if you got other good stories to tell, then you go on and tell the other good stories so that people can trust you.
Yeah, I mean that's always a thought in my head. But then also, sometimes there's some people out there who just keep putting stuff out. I mean, look at Kiss. How different is one Kiss song from another? And they've been at it for decades. But you know what? They found their niche and they're still at it. So.
Yeah, that sort of reminds me. I knew someone who read a lot of romance, and there's an author that, well, there's quite a few, but one of the biggest authors in that genre is Nora Roberts, and she is the brand. Like you pick up the book and you know exactly what types of characters are going to be there, and there's sort of like a stable of stock characters that she'll put in and put together. So
yeah, there's
so
some readers really just like the familiarity. So, but it's for me, I thought for me, the idea of doing the same thing over and over again and just changing the window dressing doesn't appeal to me. I feel like I would get bored with it. So I will move on to more things I find interesting.
So that's really interesting, but I want to talk about Ember War a little more before we move on. What you got a fan in the chat here. He says there's no filler. Every book is a solid adventure, and it has it all: alien invasion, mecha, spec ops, space battles. So that's sort of two questions about the Ember War. What is the one or two things like you're going to say to someone to say, hey, you might be interested in trying this out because it's got blank?
Yeah, I tell them it's got great space battles, it's got great characters, and then it has a good complete storyline. That's three things. But I'm gonna, if people are still listening, I'm gonna keep giving more things.
All right, and that follows up. This is a question that I think is more interesting to me anyway. So you've told the Ember War story, but at this point you're a master of military science fiction. Are there things in the Ember War that you'd like to continue doing with a new story, or are there things that you didn't get a chance to do in Ember War that you want to bring in to your future endeavors?
Well, I tell you, I love mechs and writing about mechs, and that's always lots of fun. So I do have another series that I'm going to be writing later this year that comes back to mechs, but a little bit. But I also have to kind of balance that with, I want it to be a very grounded story and kind of give a soldier's perspective. Because when I pitched this series is going to be published with Baen, and when I pitched it, I said I want to start with characters who are approaching war with bright eyes and kind of naive expectations, and then by the end they are that guy with the 1,000-yard stare. And so the part of the series is, okay, how do I get those characters from A to B? And so that's going to be more interesting. It's not so much the grand politics of everything, but more the experience of the soldier. And then also there's a really interesting kind of spiritual aspect I want to bring into that series also, which I was able to touch on a little bit with the Ember War, but with this new series, it's going to be, a kind of a religious organization that will be brand new to the readers, and they're going to be kind of like, are these guys, how can they even do this? So there'll be a lot of mystery towards that. So I'm looking forward to that. And then also other thing I didn't get to do with the Ember War, I think I'd like to do a series where the humans are in they have to work with aliens, and they under the aliens' terms, and that would be so unusual for the reader, where this alien sort of centurion shows up and he's telling all these humans how to do things, and it makes no sense to the humans, and just how the humans start to learn the alien culture. I'd like to do something like that. That'd be fun.
The thing that strikes me about the first part is or your first answer is the idea of taking people from their being young and naive to veterans, traumatized veterans. And I guess I'd like to know, how has the response been from readers who are veterans? Because I imagine you have readers who are both veterans and not,
Yeah,
just people
there's
who like regular adventure.
typically the response I get from veterans is that they read my books and they say, "Oh, Richard's obviously a veteran because he knows all the sort of like the little inside jokes that we have and some of the experiences that we go through. Like the average person out there doesn't understand how important it is to take care of your feet when you're at war." And when I've been in Iraq, and you think about your feet all the time, like how are these boots? Do I need to air these boots out? Do I need new boots? It's amazing how much thought and discussion goes into taking care of your feet, and then also what it's like to just try to survive on the same 4 MREs for months on end when you're in the desert. Ask me how I know about that one, but anyway.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So I'm able to put in a lot of little sort of things about that the veterans pick up on, and the veterans know, he knows what he's doing, and then also know the difference between a clip and a magazine, which a lot of non-veteran writers tend to make mistakes of.
That's really interesting. We spoke with there's another writer who uh, just did a whole anthology on dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, and he got a lot of response from the backers of that one. And another one that we talked to, Nick Cole, who also does spacefaring military science fiction. He did a whole series about characters who were experimented with, genetically and mystically and otherwise. And he also got a huge response from a lot of veterans who are dealing with those issues. So I guess I don't have a question in there. I'm saying that I predict your readers, your fans are really going to enjoy you bringing that sort of stuff into a new series.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, every time I get an email or a message or a review from someone who says, "Oh, I've enjoyed this so much," I think, "Oh my goodness, I did what I was at. I accomplished my mission to just entertain people for a good number of hours, and then also perhaps give them a little insight into something they hadn't thought about." So it's always nice to to give people an insight, and then also give people a break from the crap that's in their Facebook feed or whatever they see on Twitter.
Oh, tell me about it. I'm off that stuff for nearly for good, and I don't ever want to go back. Speaking of social media.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would hope to, I'd probably start putting in some rants against social media in the books, or maybe in the future everyone's going to be like, "Boy, Facebook, what a mistake that was," and then people realize that was not helping anybody. But we'll see.
All right, we don't usually do much in the way of politics or current events around here. But what's your prediction of stuff like that we're going to go back in the near future and be like, yeah, that was insane. Do you remember when we put all of our baby pictures on Facebook? That was nuts.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think what's the parallel that we kind of go to. I mean, in Victorian times, people would eat mummies, and I'm not making that up. People in England would import and eat mummies and get very sick from it. But and then also in Victorian times, people would rent pineapples for parties, and they would just have a pineapple sitting on a table. Everyone come over and look at the pineapple. And so, I mean, perhaps we'll get to that point where people are like, "You used to take pictures of your lunch and just share it." So
I don't even understand that.
Probably go back to that. I don't think anyone's ever sitting there going, "But what did The Rock have for brunch?" No, I don't think it happens.
Crazy.
I don't understand the lunch thing now. I don't understand the taking pictures of your lunch thing now. I think that's how I know I was getting older, is when I stopped understanding what people were doing now. Like Let's Plays. I will watch like these little documentaries people produce on things. There's a whole series, what happened, that's about disastrous video game productions, and I'll kick a half hour out of my life and spend a half hour watching why this particular disastrous video game turned out disastrous. And I know a lot of people might think that's a waste of time, but I won't kick 8 hours of my life out and watch somebody else play a video game for 8 hours.
Yeah, I remember when it's always like the thought of when I was younger, the thought of watching someone else play a video game was the most boring idea ever. Like you're like, let's all sit on the couch and watch Bobby try to beat level 1-4 of Mario World. Boring. But now there's this Twitch thing, and everyone's on there watching people play video games. I'm like, all right, maybe I was wrong back then. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm out of touch. I am officially out of touch with the younger generation. My little nephews, they watch Let's Plays all the time. I think they watch Let's Plays more than they actually play. And I'm just like, I won't do it. I play video games, but I won't watch somebody else do it.
Yep.
I have two explanations for that. Because guilty, I have watched people play video games on Twitch before, and it's really strange. The one thing is that if it's a skill-based game, if you watch a good player, you can learn.
Yeah.
So there's one thing, which is kind of a silly way to do it because it's more fun to learn by playing, but what are you going to do? The other one is Jackson Anderson in chat brought up. Their Let's Plays are modern TV programming for people who are on the internet instead of paying for cable. And that doesn't make sense unless you put into perspective, I want to say kids these days, they spend all their time online. Like that's where they interact with all their friends. You rarely have the couch. You rarely go over to Billy's house to watch him beat level 1-4. Or when I was a kid, we just went over to this other guy's house and played Street Fighter all day.
Oh yeah, good times.
Oh yeah. We barely have that experience anymore. It's all online.
Yeah.
That's the only way it makes sense, and it's still silly.
Speaking of abruptly changing the subject, I was feeling guilty because I kept on wanting to read book 1 of the Ember Wars before you came on, so I could at least have something of yours read. And I was like, this morning I was like, I haven't read anything of his, and I feel so terrible. And that was before I was looking at your Amazon page right now. And I realized I actually have read something of yours. I have read Through the Never.
Oh, okay.
And I loved it. I remember reading this and really, really liking it. It's one of my favorite Galaxy's Edge books.
Yeah, for everyone playing at home, Through the Nether is a standalone book within the Galaxy's Edge universe for the Legion of the Centurion. And Nick Cole and Jason Osbach approached me and said, hey, we got this sort of anthology sort of series going on. Would you like to be involved? And I said, well, how can I tell this kind of a story? They said, yes, go for it. Like, okay, this will be fun. So, I decided to write because I knew that, that within Galaxy's Edge, there were people who had sided with the first big bad, Goth Sullus, against the Republic. And my thought was, well, why don't we show how someone could, side with Goth Sullus? So we had, the story that's within Through the Nether. And, that was a lot of fun. And every so often I would pester Jason and Nick with questions like, what happened? Like, can I do this with this one certain character? And say, yeah, go ahead. I'm like, okay, very fun. And then, what about this guy? Can I have this with him? Like, yeah, go ahead. I'm like, oh, this is easy. Okay, great. So, writing for with Jason and Nick was really easy, and I had a great time with it.
Awesome, a lot of love for those guys.
Yeah,
we're big fans of them over here. Although we still haven't gotten Jason Ounsbach on.
Yeah, he was on once. We had him and Nick on at the same time.
Oh, I must have been dead that day. Yeah. So speaking of abruptly going back to the real subject, um, tell me about the what was it? The exiled ship?
Yeah, the Exile Fleet. So that was a different series that I had the idea for. I was reading an article about World War II where Churchill had made I think it was Churchill had made a statement that if the Germans had taken over England, that England's navy would survive and lead, a reinvasion to liberate the homeworld. And I was like, or the homeland. I'm like, oh, that's a great concept. Let me go with that. So we have Albion Lost. It starts with Albion Lost, and then the main enemy, the Dagon. They're humans, but for some reason they all have blue or excuse me, purple or green skin, and they're hell bent on conquering all humans who they call ferals. And you just trying and having how that whole invasion comes out, plays out, and then how Albion and the one last fleet and the Commodore who's in charge of this last fleet, how he has to organize and rally everyone to his cause. It's been a lot of fun. I'm glad that I'm able to tell this story in 6 books. So I think that perhaps as I get better as a writer, I'm able to condense stories down a little bit better and give people, good sized chunks of something to read that doesn't quite become the months long commitment that some other series can be.
It kind of reminds me that quote. I wonder if have you ever read SSGB by Len Deaton?
No, I'm not.
It's an alternate history about Britain being conquered, um, and the British fleet is still free. I wonder if he also took inspiration from that same Churchill quote.
Very well could. One of the first things I ever wrote was a screenplay about the Red Baron, the World War I fighter pilot. And I put that screenplay up on some websites back when such a thing was possible. And I kept running into other people who'd written about the Red Baron. Now, the Red Baron died when I believe he was 26. So, and his life was very well documented throughout his entire piloting career. And what I always thought was really interesting was how each of the other, I think 4 other authors I met who wrote Red Baron screenplays, we all took a very different look and kind of approach to telling his story. And I thought that was interesting how there can be, the exact same material, not a whole lot of it, but very, very different takes on it, on this man's life. And I thought that was interesting how that happened.
I mean, it is a great idea. It's kind of like it's a great idea for a story or a great idea for a series where you have uh, the last survivors who turn around and make war and are able to liberate their country. Um, that's an awesome fodder for a story.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I'm up to 6 books already.
It's kind of like Battlestar Galactica.
A little bit. Yeah, I was going to suggest. I was going to mention that, but for the new Battlestar Galactica, there was no home to go to. They had to keep going and find something else. But,
yeah, it's like Battlestar Galactica if they actually did what Admiral Kane wanted and had a chance of winning. I mean, they've made it clear, you have no chance of winning in both the original series and this one, but that would have been a much cooler series if they did have a chance of winning and could have carried it off.
Yeah. I think Battlestar Galactica. I mean, there's always rumors about it being rebooted, but I think that the newer TV show probably would have been better if it had less studio interference. But because I think like towards the 3rd and 4th season, Sci-Fi was like, we need it to be episodic, and Battlestar Galactica was not an episodic series where every single episode had to be able to stand on its own. So I think they tried to walk that fine line and ended up making a mess everywhere.
Well, between that and the writers not actually having a game plan, yeah.
Yeah, I always thought that was funny how they say, oh, in the beginning, the Cylons have a plan. And then they show the special called The Plan, and it turns out there was no plan. I'm like, bruh.
They need some disciplined writers.
Yeah.
You should do more screenplays, for sure.
My one foray into screenwriting taught me that you really need to know somebody in Hollywood to get anything made. And then, when I was sitting around trying to figure out, okay, do I want to write another screenplay or do I want to write another novel? I came across the blog by J.A. Conrath, and he laid out how indie publishing was working. This was like 7 years old before indie publishing became really more mainstream. And I was reading, how he was doing this and then how he was making money. I'm like, this seems a lot better because I can write a book, actually get paid for it, versus writing a screenplay and then trying to run around Hollywood for years on years, throwing my scripts at people at our agents in the street. So, I went with let me write books and then wait for Hollywood to come to me instead of let me go chase Hollywood. So Hollywood has not come to me yet, but you know what? I'm really having a lot of fun writing, so I'm not too upset.
Well, now you know. Now you know somebody in Hollywood, and he may have trouble getting work too, but Nick Cole's always there for us.
Yeah, my one of my friends here in Las Vegas owns a talent agency, but he mostly provides actors for commercials, so doesn't help too much. But if I ever want to be in a Dr. Pepper commercial, it might happen. So we'll see.
That's awesome. Plus, you can write the most believable military scene for that Dr. Pepper
That's
commercial.
True. Dr. Pepper is a field combat doctor now, and just keep going that 37 flavors. I need penicillin, or whatever.
In space, no one can hear the fizz. Sorry, I've had a lot of sugar today, in case you couldn't tell. Actually, speaking of things that sounds familiar to, the Exile Fleet sounds a lot like. Didn't they do a TV show with a similar premise, The Last Fleet?
I think it was The Last Ship.
The Last Ship.
Yeah. Funny thing about that. So Eric Dane, he's the actor that plays the captain on The Last Ship, and so Eric Dane. I had one book called Hell's Horizon. And I convinced Podium Audio to make a 2-person audiobook with that, because the way the story is written is from 2 very different points of view on a military science fiction battlefield. And I wrote one half, and the other half was written by Jonathan Brzee, who's also a combat veteran and former Marine lieutenant colonel, retired. So we went to Podium and said, hey, let's get some A-list actors to do the narration. And ended up getting Eric Dane to narrate my side, and then Giancarlo Esposito from Breaking Bad and The Mandalorian to narrate the other side. So it was kind of back and forth. And before this had ever even come up, my youngest child, his first name is Nathan, and his middle name is James. So if you've seen The Last Ship, the name of the ship there is the Nathan James. And my wife loves that show, but refuses to admit that's how my son got his middle name. That's because she wanted the ship somehow. But so I'm just hoping that by the time he gets to middle school, that show has kind of left the zeitgeist, or otherwise he might be in for some trouble. But we'll see. I doubt it.
I'll be honest. I don't think your series sounds like anything else. It just reminds me of a better version of Battlestar Galactica. And I've been a Battlestar Galactica fan since the movie first came out in was it
79?
79.
Yeah.
So yeah, it sounds like a better version of Battlestar Galactica. It doesn't sound like Battlestar Galactica. It sounds like a better version of Battlestar Galactica, because the thought of people turning around and fighting against the aliens instead of just running across the galaxy is a much better story. It's a much more heroic story. And it's a story that's far better suited for space opera. And I like the concept more. uh, than just on the run to find Earth. It's a more ambitious concept.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun with the Exile Fleet, and then and what I'm able to do with some of the characters. One of the characters is he's what I call a faceless, and he's able to change the way his face looks and the ways a lot of his physical attributes as a spy to infiltrate places. And I've had so much fun with that character, just putting him into crazy places, and also at the same time he's addicted to quite a number of chemicals and other substances, which also makes his character more fun to write. And it's good to have that kind of thing, but you always have the problem with that kind of characters. The reader tends to get a little suspicious every time a character does something a little out of what they expect. They're like, oh, it's Tolan. It's him doing his faceless thing again. So it's hard to walk that that fine line analogy again of like I loved Odo from Deep Space Nine, and I went to a convention and got Rene Auberjonois to sign an Odo book that was written by Peter David. I still have that, and he talked about how they would they had a couple of Deep Space Nine scripts where at the end it's like, oh, that was Odo the whole time, and then for some reason they never really committed to doing that kind of an episode because they always thought it would be a letdown for the audience, and I was like, huh, and that sort of idea always stayed with me.
Yeah, that's a tough line to walk for sure. Go ahead.
I had a question. I had a good question because we're moving on towards when we have to let our guest go, and I forgot it. It went right out of my head.
I stomped all over your question.
No. This is it. You have done a lot of books with co-authors that I saw. And that's one of the things I've noticed is when I'm looking through the Mill SF books on my, JAG a couple months ago, I noticed that you had a lot of books with other co-authors. How is that in the indie space?
Well, every co-authorship is different, and it all depends on the relationship between the two authors. And for all but one of my co-author books, it's been okay. They are writing within the Ember War, so I've laid out everything. I know how everything has to work. The rules are already established, so there's really nothing to discuss other than here's the story that we're going to agree on. Let's write that, and that's worked out really well with me and Josh Hayes and Scott Moon and everybody else. So that's been a lot of fun. And then also the co-authored book with Jonathan Brzee, it was more like that was a little harder because it was a brand new universe, and we just agreed on here's our tech level and here's sort of the background, but then also what was happening was the things his character would do, my character would have to react to, and then what my character would do, his character would have to react to. So there was so much back and forth over that book to make sure, like, I go say, I need you to establish cats, and doing this certain thing in your book, in your chapter here, so I can pay that off in this other chapter over here. So, that one was for Hell's Horizon. That book was more difficult to write just by the very nature of, it's not like we're writing together and then you can adjust here and I can adjust there. It's no problem. Versus you are writing alone. I am writing alone, but these two things have to mesh together. That was harder. That was a lot harder, but still the book that came out was excellent in my opinion. And then I also wrote a book with David Weber, who I have admired for decades. I read so many Anna Harrington books in college. And then when he approached me, he said, "Hey, do you want to write this series with me?" I was like, "Yes, please." And then also it was a little easier because he already had everything established. He's like, "Here's all the rules, and here's how we're going to do it." I'm like, "Okay, fine, boom, off we go." And then we've got Governor Sent to Empire, and we're going to start on the second book for that here pretty soon. So, but also writing with David, who's been writing for he is the master of military science fiction and space opera, in my opinion. So. When it comes time to write with him, it's very much, here's what we're going to do. And then I will, sometimes I'll have a suggestion and he'll almost all, whenever he has an objection to my suggestion, he's so professional and polite. And like, that's a great idea, Richard. But except, then he lays out why that doesn't work. I'm like, oh, okay, no problem. Then other times I suggest something. He's like, that's great. I would never have thought of that. Let's do that. So writing with David has been just a tremendous experience. I'm so blessed to have it. But as far as, writing within the indie space, I'd say that, have everything established before you start writing of this is the story. This is how we're going to execute on it. This is how we're going to do all the royalties and advertising, all that. And then that way, you're not 75% through the book. And then the other writer goes, no, I don't want that now. I want to change my mind. It's like, what? No one wants to write a book and then realize 2/3 of the way through that you have to redo it. So that people wonder why writers drink. It's probably for stuff like that.
That reminds me of a question about writing itself. I haven't asked a writer this in a while, but are you outliner or pantser?
I'm a huge outliner. I love outlining. That way, I know what the story has to be, and I'm confident of where the story's going before I even sit down to write the first word. So
yeah,
I don't know how pantsers do it. I would be sitting there thinking like, oh, what if the good idea fairy comes along, and then, I have to scrap everything. Oh my gosh. And I know that's happened to them, but when I outline, I have some pretty extensive outlines, and then every once in a while the muse will still show up and whisper in my ear to go do something else.
But
go ahead.
The thing is, I know enough about military people to know what the good idea fairy is.
Oh yeah. She's vicious, and some people just don't know how to tell her no. But yeah. So, but sometimes I'll still get the good idea fairy come along, and I've noticed that if I just say I'll use that idea somewhere else, she'll go away, and then I just put that idea aside for a different project. But no, having the outline done and knowing where the story is going to go is very helpful. And I will spend more time outlining than actually writing the whole thing, just to get the story correct.
I you see no reason why you shouldn't do that. The only
very often sudden ideas that come to you will have unanticipated or unexamined consequences that can ruin books. If you ever watch a movie or TV show or whatever, and they pop out something, some miracle device or something that when you look at it, it'll ruin everything about a previous book in the series, like the time turner from book 3 of the Harry Potter series.
Mm-hmm.
That very often things like that. And I'm not saying that was the case with Harry Potter. I'm just saying that devices like that are very often the result of the good idea fairy. You just get this sudden urge and you're like, oh, this would be perfect. And they throw it in and maybe it works for that specific scene or that specific, section of the book. But if you're just throwing it in willy-nilly, you don't have time to examine, or you haven't taken the time to examine all the consequences or think it through or see if it makes sense in the larger series, and you're actually ruining a whole bunch of stuff. Whereas if you're outlining the book, then you're not going to do that.
Yeah, normally if I ever see something like that in a show, I just think, the writer got stuck and they just threw a Hail Mary and tried to get out of the problem that they wrote themselves into. That's normally what I attribute it to, is that the writer just, they got to the point where they realized they couldn't solve the problem organically, so they had to go back or invent something new to magically solve their own problem. And that's why I like outlining, because I can get to the point where the story, like, okay, this doesn't work here. I need to have sit there and think to myself, I have to go back to the first act and have this one space fleet be prepared to come in at the end of the third act to rectify the situation. So then I have to go back and change the outline to make everything seem like it all just fit together perfectly, and I look like a genius. when people read it. But really, sometimes I'm like, I don't know how to fix this. Let me go back and there we go. Now it works. And then like with the Ember War, one of the big things is there was no faster than light travel. But then during one of the series called the Terra Nova, a bunch of characters from the first series goes to this dwarf galaxy outside of the Milky Way and finds some technology that does use faster than light travel. And then that FTL comes back into the main storyline for the final Ember War series. But yeah, and that ended up solving a whole bunch of problems that I needed to solve for the third series. So
Okay.
We have about 5 more minutes before you have to take off. Do you have any last thoughts or anything else you want to plug? Other than you have the final novel in the entire Ember War series coming out in 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, the Albion Lost, the final Albion Lost series should be out in about 3 weeks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's for all the people who are out there, I really appreciate everyone who reads and listens to military sci-fi because it's only possible with the readers and the listeners who give their time and spend the money to support artists who are out there, trying to give you guys the best stories. So and I don't think we artists ever show enough appreciation to the audience, because the audience is what makes it possible, and the audience gets to choose which direction things go. So for everyone out there who likes good quality military sci-fi and space opera, thank you for continuing to read and support and leave those reviews. Reviews matter a lot because it tells the artists where they're going right or where they're going wrong, and we appreciate those honest reviews as well.
Well, for my part, I'm glad you came on. It's great to talk to another good author, and what you said about the audience rings true. I haven't heard of an audience with a deeper appreciation for the work than the military science fiction audience. Veterans, in particular, they love being heard. They love knowing that other people are out there with the same knowledge. It's a great club, and I love hearing from it. Really appreciate everybody hanging out in the chat today. I hope everybody listening to later really enjoyed the show. But in the interest of time, I'll stop there and say, have a great week.
Thanks, everybody. Pleasure being here.
All right. Is this my turn? This one?
Take it away. Take it away, DW.
We want to say thank you to Mr. Fox for coming on the show and talking about his several series. We want to say thank you to everyone who turned in and listened live and participated in the chat. And we want to say thank you to everyone who will listen to later. You can catch this show just about every Saturday about the same time. That is 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on youtube.com/geekgab. That is youtube.com/geekgab. Or you can catch us on soundcloud.com, the Google Play Store, or on the iTunes Store. Just do a search for Geek Gab. We're available to download on the device of your choice, or you can listen to us on the web. And I think that's it. I don't think we have anything else to say for today, except we also appreciate our audience. We thank you guys for subscribing. We thank you guys for listening to the show. And by all means, if you have any suggestions for guests or anybody you'd like to see if we can get on the show, go ahead and send us an email at geekgabfest@gmail.com. That's geekgabfest@gmail.com. And we will see if we can arrange for whoever it is your dream guest might be. I'm not saying we can, but we will definitely give it a try. We are signing out for today, folks. But don't you worry. Don't you fret. We will be back.